Okay.
For starters, Commissioner, may I ask what brought you to the Commission on Human Rights, and what do you consider as your most significant achievement thus far?
I've learned of the vacancy of all of the positions at the Commission on Human Rights way back in 2021. And I applied for the position. And luckily, I was appointed as one of the commissioners. And if there is one thing that I am proud that I was able to share or give to the Commission on Human Rights is I was the proponent of how to address the case backlogs of the Commission on Human Rights. I requested our chairperson if we could conduct an inventory of cases. And we found that there are cases as old as 1989, 1990 dockets which are still pending. And I think it was around 17,000 cases. And we were able to reduce it by, I think we were able to dispose of around 9,000 out of that 17, Your Honors. So I consider that as an achievement, considering that we are just on our third year at the Commission on Human Rights.
Records show that you were with the Ombudsman for a significant number of years,
Yes, Your Honor.
and has served. How many ombudsmen have you served?
When I joined the Office of the Ombudsman in 1997, the Ombudsman then was Ombudsman Desierto. Then he was succeeded by Ombudsman Marcelo.
Marcelo.
Then Ombudsman Gutierrez, and Ombudsman Carpio Morales, and then Ombudsman Martires, Your Honors.
Okay, 5, no?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, so what would you have done differently if you were the ombudsman during all these years? During those years,
Maybe I will not change policies which has big impacts with for example, when during the time of Ombudsman Gutierrez, she created task forces. One of those is task force on addressing human trafficking, but the focus of the investigation is, of course, government officials involved in trafficking. Then we have another task force, we call it Task Force Marshall then, wherein we do implement warrants, or we look for accused who have been who are already convicted, but they are not yet in jail. It was an effective approach. It has a big impact on the function of the office. But then, when Ombudsman Morales came to the office, she decided to revoke, to suspend these task forces. Also, another one is there was then a Bureau of Resident Ombudsman, and they are stationed in major government offices, but then that was also suspended. Maybe those are, if ever I'll get appointed, I will not. I will look into these policies, and if they are really working, there is really no need to change those policies, Your Honor.
In 2021, Commissioner Ben Press, Ombudsman Martires proposed criminal penalties, including imprisonment or fines for anyone publicly commenting on officials SALENS, and critics included journalists, lawyers, and legislators, and they decried the move as unconstitutional and a threat to press freedom and public accountability. Can you comment on that?
The right of the public to look into statement of assets and liabilities of public official is provided under Republic Act 6713. It's stated there that it shall be open for inspection, and they can even take pictures of it. And the only restriction is that it should not be used for unlawful acts or for commerce. But there were no other additional safeguards so that access to this statement of assets and liabilities will not be abused by anyone. Now, this law, 6713, I think was passed in 1989, and technology during that time is not yet that advanced compared to our technology now. So maybe it was then the policy of Ombudsman Martires of maybe to balance the right to information vis-a-vis the right of privacy of public officials. Maybe that was the reason for coming up with that kind of policy, Your Honor.
Okay. Thank you. That was my final question, and I wish you good luck, Commissioner Ben Present. Thank you, Attorney Cuevas.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Attorney Mejia. Our next interviewer is the Honorable Justice Erlinda Pinera Uy.
Thank you, Attorney Cuevas. Good afternoon, Commissioner
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Epres. You have been a GRAF Investigation and Prosecution Officer from 1997 to 2018. What systemic challenges did you encounter in prosecutorial work, and how would you address them from a policy or leadership standpoint if you get appointed?
If there is one problem which is about backlogs in cases. During the time when I started with the Office of the Ombudsman in 1997, I was a Graft Investigation Prosecution Officer 1. The manpower was not that many, Your Honor, so we were overwhelmed by cases, and that's the reason why there were backlogs. But then, as through the years, the number of manpowers were increased, and still the number of cases keep coming. So I guess if the better approach would be first is to be strict in the periods provided by the administrative orders issued by the Ombudsman. Say for preliminary investigation, the minimum is 12 months for simple cases and 24 months for complicated cases. So if we just have to stick with the number of the period provided, and then I think that would significantly reduce the backlogs. During the time of Ombudsman Morales, I think she was effective on that. She was strict in implementing that policy, and so there was a significant decrease in the number of backlogs. So it's more on implementation of already existing guidelines of the office, Your Honors.
Coming from the CHR and your human rights advocacy, how will you balance the Ombudsman mandate of combating corruption with protecting the rights of respondents and whistleblowers?
Actually, the only difference between the mandate of the Commission on Human Rights and the Office of the Ombudsman is with respect to the focus. The Commission on Human Rights deals with human rights violations, while the Office of the Ombudsman deals with preventing graft and corruption. Both have investigative powers, although the powers of the Commission on Human Rights is merely limited to fact-finding investigation. We don't have preliminary investigation or prosecution powers. So, but in the larger scale of things, I consider that if we are able to prevent graft and corruption, if services are indeed brought to the appropriate individuals or to the people, then human rights is also promoted. For example, if corruption results in not giving adequate service or not giving the right benefit or to individuals, let's say, and because of that corruption, the health benefits of that individual is not properly given, then that would also, aside from being a corrupt act, that would also result in a violation of the economic, social rights of an individual. So I believe that they are interrelated, Your Honor.
How do you define moral courage in public office? And can you cite an instance in your career when you had to make an unpopular but principled decision?
Your Honor, when we speak of moral courage, it is doing the right thing, even if, well, as you already mentioned, Your Honor, even if that is not popular, even if you would earn the ire of individuals who are affected by that specific decision. So far, Your Honor, I haven't experienced anyone questioning my decision or having a violent reaction of, say, the decisions I made during the conduct of preliminary investigations or in the investigation reports in the conduct of fact-finding investigation. So far, wala naman po.
Even when you were a graft investigator?
Yes, Your Honor. Although, of course, the aggrieved party has the option or can file a motion for reconsideration. So even if my stand is to maintain my original findings, wala naman pong naging problema.
Any experience in high-profile cases or any political pressure exerted when you were a graft investigator?
During the time, Your Honor, when I was with the Field Investigation Office, I was part of the team which conducted an investigation on the PDAF scam, and during the process, of course, we recommended filing of cases for purposes of preliminary investigation, against members of the Senate, members of the Congress. But then there was really some sort of personal attack or any violent reaction on our findings.
And how do you plan to make, if appointed, the Office of the Ombudsman more accessible to ordinary citizens who want to report corruption but fear of retaliation?
One of the programs that I would like to implement in the event that I'll get appointed, Your Honor, is I'll make the filing of complaints more accessible by making it also take advantage of technology. Maybe if there could be a mechanism wherein all they have to do is to access the website of the Office of the Ombudsman, file a complaint, or maybe design an application so that access to the Office of the Ombudsman could be made even through cell phones, and also maybe to provide hotlines, 24-hour hotlines in the central and regional and sectoral offices, Your Honors.
So by hotline, you mean phone call?
Yes, Your Honor.
So by mere phone call, they can already submit a complaint?
Maybe we could just get the details of the acts being complained of, and then maybe dispatch a quick reaction team to.
To substantiate
Yes, Your Honor.
the oral complaint.
Yes, Your Honor.
I see. Okay. That was my last question. Good luck to you, Commissioner.
Thank you very much, Your
Epres.
Honor.
Thank you, Justice Uy. Our next interviewer is the Honorable Congresswoman Jerville Luistro.
Good afternoon, Commissioner Epres.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
It's nice to see you again.
Yes, ma'am.
The last time was during the budget briefing.
Yes, Your Honor.
My first question is, you are the only applicant who has served extensively with the Office of the Ombudsman. First question, reason why you left? And second question, reason why you wish to come back, this time as head of the Office of the Ombudsman.
When I left the Office of the Ombudsman, Your Honor, my position then was Director 4. It's salary grade 28. And then, but of course, the dream of becoming the Ombudsman was already there. And I think it can be shown by the 4 applications I made for the 4 Deputy Ombudsman position. But I wasn't lucky. I think enough during that time, and I was never appointed in those 4 applications of mine. And then came the chance of an opening from the Commission on Human Rights, and I said maybe it's a move of there was, because there was this that maybe it was not really meant that I get a higher position at the Office of the Ombudsman. And so I applied for the position of commissioner, and so it's salary grade 30. And luckily I was appointed, so that's the reason for the transfer. Now, as to the second question, why do I plan of coming back? I think it has been always the dream of a lawyer. Say, for example, if you are in the judiciary, that you really wanted to reach the high position, maybe becoming a justice of the Court of Appeals, the Supreme Court, or even the Chief Justice. My dream was also like that. And when I saw the opportunity of this vacancy, I said to myself, wala naman pong mawawala if I apply, because I will still be commissioner if I don't get appointed. And so I tried. I applied. Also, this application of mine, and if ever I'll get appointed, would serve as an inspiration to the new lawyers at the office that they could also dream of becoming one. All those ombudsman, Your Honors, who were appointed came from the Office of the Ombudsman. And they are, should I say, passers-by in our office. They would come in, stay for 7 years, then leave the office. Though technically I'm no longer from the Office of the Ombudsman. I've been out for 3 years. But if ever I'll get appointed, it would serve as inspiration to the new lawyers that pwede pong mangarap at pwede silang maging ombudsman.
I could sense, Commissioner Epres, that it is the honor which is attached to the Office of the Ombudsman, which is one of your considerations why you are envisioning to be one. And I wish to ask, that honor that is attached to the Office of the Ombudsman, is it not present as well in the Commission on Human Rights, you being one of the commissioners?
The honor is there. As I mentioned a while ago, there is really no conflict between the two. And I'm so thankful that I'm able to land jobs in these 2 prestigious institutions two independent institutions. But it's, of course, it's again that dream, Your Honor, of someday you will become the head of the office which you spent 25 years. And again, the inspiration it might send to the new lawyers. Pwede po silang mangarap.
To conclude this line of question, between becoming the chairperson of CHR and becoming the ombudsman, which would you prefer?
I am not sure, Your Honor, if...
No, this is a
yes,
hypothetical
okay.
question only.
Okay. I prefer to be appointed as the ombudsman because of the number of years I've been with that office, Your Honor.
Thank you. Earlier, Commissioner Epres, I heard about hotline. I heard about the measures which the CHR adopted about addressing the backlog. If given the chance to become the next ombudsman, what fresh perspective and innovation from your CHR experience would you bring to strengthen your response against graft and corruption?
When one of the functions of the CHR, which I think is very successful, is their collaboration with the grassroots of the community, and I don't mind, Your Honor, of copying that if that would be effective in reaching the people. And so my plan would be to make the Office of the Ombudsman more visible, reach to the grassroots level, because the grassroots are the one heavily affected of graft and corruption. And I wanted to capacitate them to be a partner of the Office of the Ombudsman so that they themselves would be empowered or be capacitated to initiate complaints or even submit reports to us, because they are the ones who are greatly affected by graft and corruption.
How do you appreciate the power of the ombudsman to accommodate anonymous complaints? Don't you think that this is being used as a weapon by political rivals to go against these public officials?
The Office of the Ombudsman has the power to investigate complaints in all forms. So even if it's an anonymous complaint, the Office of the Ombudsman has a mechanism. We have the Field Investigation Office who would validate these anonymous complaints. So if during the fact-finding investigation or the case build-up, they would establish leads, or because of the leads in those anonymous complaints, they would find substantial evidence against the person being complained of anonymously, then that would be the basis of the Office of the Ombudsman to file a complaint for purposes of preliminary investigation. And since it is an anonymous complaint, then the Field Investigation Office or the investigator of that case will now act as the nominal complainant against the public official complained of.
I see. So the Field Investigation Office will act as the nominal complainant.
Yes, Your Honor.
That is very enlightening, no?
Yes.
And can you please share with us what would be the title of the case if the Field Investigation Office is the nominal complainant?
So that would be, let's say, Mayor X versus the Field Investigation Office, then nominal complainant, then the title, the docket, and then...
Thank you. It likewise appears from your profile that as Commissioner of CHR, you have attended to over 20 forums and seminars.
Yes, Your Honor. Yes, Your
I
Honor.
just wish to be enlightened how these forums and seminars broaden your understanding of the following. One, accountability. Two, governance. And three, protection of rights.
Um, uh, I'll go first, Your Honor, with the protection of rights. When I assumed, when I came to the office of the Commission on Human Rights, it was maybe the first 3 months that I was there. It was I have to learn a lot of things, new words, new phrases, new advocacies, new everything. But then when I uh, got hold or had the grasp of the systems and advocacy, I learned that truly human rights of individuals are not really addressed. I even made a joke that mahirap ibenta ang usapin ng human rights kasi maraming tao ang medyo ayaw sa ganyang usapin. But these seminars that I've attended, for example, the one which the Commission on Human Rights is actively participating is for at the UN level is the drafting of a convention for the rights of older persons. It gave me an opportunity to see what is really the condition of our older persons in the Philippines. We see them as mere recipients of charity. Pag nabigyan na po natin sila ng ayuda and that's it. But we are trying to elevate that to look at our older persons, at not just the recipients of charity, but as rights holders, that it is their right to be supported. And so it has broadened my perspective of what really protection is. As to governance, when I was at the Commission on Human Rights, I really felt that there were even instances where I felt that I was not in a government agency. They were really very detached. Maybe it's because of the independence. And when it was there that I saw that there is really still a need to speed up on protection and addressing the needs of the people, and so that this is where effective governance should come in. Effective governance means you are to look onto the welfare of the people. Maybe just talk about politics during election and after election. No more politics. Just serve the people. And next is with respect to accountability. It is a given that the public officers must at all times be accountable to the people. And it's there that I've learned that we must advocate that our government officials should be sensitive about the needs of people, and that in the discharge of their function, they have to make sure that everything that has been allocated by the government for that specific project or for that specific group of individuals should be given to them in its entirety, Your Honor.
Thank you for my last question. Of course, the right to public information is fundamental. Would you extend it to giving public access to SALN?
The right to access SALN, Your Honor, is already is there, and that is why I think there is really a need to revisit the administrative order signed by former Ombudsman Martires, so as to give balance of the right to information vis-a-vis the right privacy, and maybe a safeguard to ensure that the access to be given should not really be used for any other purpose than to inform the public of the net worth of that specific individual. I believe there is also a provision in that administrative order that if ever if the requester has leads that that specific individual wherein he wants to obtain a copy of the SALN has leads that that person has unexplained wealth. I think there is this provision there that he could file a lifestyle check case against that individual.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Epres, and good luck on your dream of becoming the next ombudsman.
Thank you very much, Your Honor.
Thank you, Congresswoman Luistro. Before we continue, we would like to acknowledge the presence of Court of Tax Appeals Presiding Justice Roman Del Rosario. Our next interviewer is the Honorable Attorney Nesauro H. Firme.
Thank you, Attorney Maricel. Good afternoon, Commissioner.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
So I will ask you two sets of questions. One comes from the good senator, Senator Alan Cayetano, and another set will be my own. No? So the only question Senator Cayetano wants you to answer is your stand or your position on the lifestyle check. So I know that you have recently read or heard the news about the lifestyle check among all government officials. So what is your take on that?
The office of the ombudsman has the power to conduct lifestyle check, and so if I'll be appointed as an ombudsman, I will make use of that power of the ombudsman to conduct lifestyle check. I think it's in the Ombudsman Act where I think it's provided that the Office of the Ombudsman can investigate and institute recovery of unlawfully acquired wealth after February 25, 1986. So I think that's the basis of that power of the Ombudsman to conduct lifestyle check, Your Honors.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to my own set of questions. Interesting, your name is Beda.
Yes, sir.
So, but you did not go to San Beda.
No, Your Honor.
Why?
The decision to take up law
They will charge you free of tuition fee because you're the owner of it.
came in very late, Your Honor, and so the only available school where I can enroll was UST at that time. I started in UST, but eventually ended up graduating at the Arellano Law School.
Okay. So first question, Commissioner, if appointed as the Ombudsman, what can the stakeholders expect from you?
The stakeholders, Your Honor, can expect that we will strengthen our function as the protector of the people and as the central arm of the government in the prevention of graft and corruption. They can be assured of a speedy but just resolution of cases. We'll be reducing backlogs and we will also make way of higher survival rate of cases with the Sandigan Bayan. And we will, my plan really is to bring the Office of the Ombudsman closer to the people, especially those who are greatly affected by graft and corruption.
So we understand, Commissioner, that independence is one of the qualities of a good ombudsman. So my question now is, in discharging your present as well as the past duties, were there instances where you have displayed independence?
In the discharge of my function here at the Commission on Human Rights, and even during when I was Director 4, and even if I was then a graft investigation officer, I've always exhibit independence, Your Honor. Though there was, I haven't experienced any attempts to influence my decisions, but it was, and it's still my resolve that if ever time would come that there would be pressure, I will maintain the independence. Maybe that's the reason why I've been in the government service now for a total of almost 30 years, and I haven't no complaint whatsoever has been lodged against me. Maybe it's because I was able to maintain that independence or that level of integrity, Your Honor.
Well, speaking of integrity, was there any instance in your life, no, personal or otherwise, professional, where your integrity was put to test, and how did you navigate through that?
I haven't experienced that kind of dilemma or that problem wherein my integrity has been questioned. And so I think I'm just very thankful that there's no such incident, Your Honor. And maybe, as I've said, maybe it's because of what I've displayed or what the people has seen in me, that there was never an instance wherein my integrity has been questioned.
So next question, Commissioner, how about public perception? How much value do you give public perception?
If you are a government official, public perception is important. It's not enough that you are a person of integrity, but you have to show or you have to act as one, Your Honor. Though they say that when you are in public service, hindi ka pwedeng maging balat sibuyas. But of course, it is very important that you have to be a person of integrity, and you should act as one, like one, Your Honor.
And I understand in the CHR, despite all the good things that you have done or you've been doing, you still get criticisms. And how do you handle public criticisms, Commissioner?
What I've learned in the Commission of Human Rights is that really you cannot please everybody. If you are discharging like function of investigation, one party would be very happy of what you've done, and the other one would be will not totally agree with you. And so there is always this chance of being criticized. But if you discharge your function, if you decided based on evidence, even if you get criticisms, I think that's okay as long as your decisions or resolutions are backed by evidence, Your Honor.
So next question, I have 5 things in mind, Commissioner. No? So I want you to rank them accordingly. No? The one being the most significant, no? Most important as far as you are concerned. No? The number 5 would be the least significant. So these are the 5 things in my mind. No? And let us also assume that it's already 2029 and you are the ombudsman. In other words, tumawid ka na to the next administration. We all know by 2028, we will have a new president, by the election. So it's 2029. So these are the things that would confront you, probably an ethical dilemma, no? So ito yung mga naglalaban-laban, no, in your thoughts. Number one would be the president that appointed you to this post. So we're talking of the present administration. Number two would be the president at that time, so the new president, 2029. Number three would be the public, the stakeholders, including their perception, the public perception. Number five would be the safety of your family. I understand you still have a kid.
Yes, Your Honor. Yes, Your Honor.
And number five would be your personal goal, your personal mission. So which among these would be number one, and which would be the number five?
I think the first number one on the list of priorities, Your Honor, would be the public, because they are our stakeholders. They are the ones will be greatly affected by if the office of the ombudsman would renege in its duty, being the protector of the people. Maybe number two would be the safety of my family. If ever, maybe third would be personal goal, and I really cannot rank which one's the fourth or the fifth, but it would be the former and the current president by 2029, Your Honors.
When you are the ombudsman, are you ready to have, and would you welcome bodyguards? You will be given
I
bodyguards.
think
So are you,
it's automatic that will be given, but then
so it will change your lifestyle. Are you ready for that?
I am not really into having a very big entourage. I would really prefer, maybe if there are threats or confirmed threats, then that's the only time. But if none, no, Your Honor.
So I understand there could be some individuals, public officials perhaps, would help you get disposed. So the question now is, if the evidence warrants, would you have the courage, guts, the nerve to file administrative and criminal cases against those public officials who helped you get this ombudsman post?
They are, if ever, they are aware of the function of the office. And for example, if someone or will help me get appointed, they are aware of the function of the office. And I think I will not have problems with that, Your Honor, if all of my decisions will be backed by evidence. It would be hard, maybe that would result in burning bridges, but then you already now have the public to protect. Maybe it's just like, in an election, you talk of politics during election, but after election, then we start serving the public, Your Honor.
Last question, Commissioner. So if ever appointed, what significant siguro development in your life would make you decide to quit the ombudsman post? Because you will stay there for about 7 years.
7 years, Your Honor. So, right now, I don't see any reason for me leaving the office. Rarely do people get the chance to head this office. And it will be a great privilege on my part if ever I get appointed. And so I don't see any reason why I should not finish my term as the ombudsman, Your Honor.
Thank you, Commissioner Epres.
Thank you very
And
much.
good
Your
luck.
Honor. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Attorney Firme. Our last interviewer is the Honorable Justice Jose Catral Mendoza.
Thank you very much, Attorney Marife. Good afternoon, Commissioner.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
We have interviewed you in the past and nominated you. So I have just few questions. You mentioned earlier about Justice Morales or Ombudsman Morales discontinuing with the program of deputizing resident ombudsman. Oh, what do you think was her reason?
I think, Your Honor, the reason was that during that time, she saw it as not being effective. I think the reason was that there has become a familiarity between the resident ombudsman and the people inside the agency. And I think that was the reason why she suspended the of putting
There were
resident ombudsman.
MOAs then,
Yes, Your Honor.
right? Oh. And it would be like the resident auditor,
Yes, Your Honor.
according to Secretary Sigson, ginugod time lang pag resident auditor o resident ombudsman. Anyway, you said you'd want to review it.
Yes,
Oh.
yes, Your Honor.
Can you give me a reason at this time why you want to review it? Knowing the reason why it was suspended.
Putting a presence of the office in that government agency I believe would prevent commission of graft and corruption. Maybe there should just be that the persons who are to be designated as resident ombudsman should not stay there for a permanent basis. There should be maybe they could stay there for 3 months and then go to another
Rotation.
agency. Yes, Your Honor.
Oh.
So that there would be no familiarity.
I stepped a while earlier. I do not know if this was covered. Are you familiar with the Circular 28 of the DOJ? You were not asked.
I'm very sorry.
Oh, in 2024, the DOJ came out with circular number 28, replacing probable cause with reasonable certainty of conviction as the standard. Are you going to adopt that standard? Kasi ngayon, probable cause lang.
Yes, yes, Your Honor.
Yes, in the Ombudsman, it's probable cause. But in the DOJ, they adopted a reasonable certainty of conviction. What is your view?
Part of my plan, Your Honor, is to conduct an audit of cases, also those who are pending with the Office of the Special Prosecutor, and to look if with respect to the survival rates of cases. Now, if the survival rate of cases with the Sandigan Bayan is high, meaning those cases being prosecuted, cases wherein arising from the preliminary investigation and lodged now with the Sandigan Bayan has a high survival rate, then don't I'll stick with the probable cause, Your Honor. But if the survival rate is quite low, then maybe it's worth considering to adopt the measure being implemented by the Department of Justice.
Even if you were with the human rights, you were familiar with the decisions of the Sandigan Bayan? Not all.
Not all, Your Honor.
Okay.
I was with the Office of the Special Prosecutor from 2012 to 2016, and that was only the time when I was quite acquainted with the resolutions. But after I went back to the central office, and now with the Commission on Human Rights for 3 years, I'm no longer updated with decisions.
Anyway,
Apologies.
when you were there, to what Sandigan Bayan decisions do you disagreed with?
Um,
Because you filed cases, too.
yes. My apologies, Your Honor. I cannot recall.
Okay lang, it's all right.
Apologies.
Oh. Uh, Nowadays, people talk about corruption. Even the president talks about corruption. What do you think of what do you think of the corruption in the Philippines? Is it endemic or prevalent?
I see it, Your Honor, as being prevalent. Your Honor.
Prevalent,
Yes, Your Honor.
not endemic. You've been with the ombudsman for 25 years. You have a better experience or views.
Not all government agencies are rigged with graft and corruption. There are certain agencies that are wherein graft and corruption exists, and so I think there's still hope for these other government agencies to be
Okay.
graft free. Your Honor.
As to the cause, what do you think? Is it the system or the individual?
Well, it would all start with the individual, Your Honor. And if, say, in that specific government agency, it is common for individuals to commit corruption, then it becomes the system of that particular office. And so it really starts with the individual, Your Honor.
Individual.
Even if it's the system is already there, but if he doesn't want to be part of it, then the number of people engaged into it would not increase, Your Honor.
Okay. Have you heard of the term, the phrase, kinain na ng sistema?
Yes, Your Honor. Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Okay, a government official diverts funds to a disaster area without proper bidding or paperwork, but lives were clearly saved. Would you pursue a case against that official?
if would it be okay, Your Honor, if I ask a question, if what was that funds earmarked for
Oh,
before it was diverted for in the flood or typhoon tested area?
I think it is, there was a disaster. Yun lang naman ang ano.
Opo.
There was a disaster. I think you can explain your answer.
Yes, Your Honor. If the fund is generally available, it was not earmarked for any specific purpose yet, and I don't see anything wrong putting that fund to.
Even if it is not earmarked for
If it's
that
not
disaster.
earmarked for any specific purpose, I think it is okay to make use of
It's
that
okay.
funds for.
There is no technical malversation.
I think there will be technical malversation, Your Honor, if it
But
is
you will not pursue it.
if it is earmarked for a specific project, then you make use of it for other purpose other than for which it was earmarked, Your Honor.
Mm. Okay. How well do you know City Prosecutor Tuliao? Why have you named him as one of your referents?
I've known him, Your Honor, since 1999 or 2000, Your Honor, because we're together at the Office of the Deputy Ombudsman for the Military Affairs.
I see.
Yes, sir.
And Commissioner Generosa, you're together now in
Yes,
this age.
yes, Your Honor. Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. That will be all.
Thank
Your
you very much.
excuse.
Thank you.